when you was going into that first fight, when you're actually in the cage now, obviously you've been training for it. You've been doing the rounds.
Yeah.
But when there's like takedown attempts, so like you're scrambling and you're defending it.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to adjust on fight night in the cage with that?
It was very difficult for a number of reasons, right? So this was the start of 2022. Didn't really get much grappling in beforehand, again, because of the situation going on. And the people who I was grappling with were, again, heavyweights and light heavyweights.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very different to someone who is a little bit smaller, who is primarily a grappler. And the fact that it was a big instance was the fact that I hadn't had a fight like that in over 10 years in relation to like starting again grassroots sort of level. And the pace is very different. You notice even watching shows, as you get around all over the country, you get to see the shows on different levels, right? And you start off in the grassroots amateur levels, you can see everything's like quite hectic. Everything's going on. And as you continue to climb the ranks, people get a lot more experience, a lot more tactical, there's a lot more thought and logic behind what they're doing. So sometimes, although they're really exciting fights, there's a lot of thoughts behind what's going to happen next. So you can understand the predictability of things. But once you're going back to the grassroots levels, like anything can happen, and especially when it came to the grappling, because I've never been in a situation where someone's trying to shoot for my legs. So and I think within the first 30 seconds or so, got shot for a takedown. I was like, okay, let's go. And obviously, like in my head, the plan was keep on the feet, continue to strike, etc., etc. And nothing ever goes to the plan, right? Not straight away anyway. So within the first round, I think got taken down, managed to get straight back up onto my feet, and then got taken down again within the same round. I was like, okay, this is. And I remember Rafel, he was like on, I think he ended up mounting me at the time, I think he mounted me, and then throwing some punches. And the thought of this isn't going to plan crossed my mind. And then the next thought was, all right, cool. Start moving because the ref's going to stop the fight, essentially. So I kept moving, managed to get back to my feet and continued the fight after that. But it's funny the conversations you have with yourself during the fight,
yeah. And after the fight, though, like you walked away with the win.
Yeah.
How did you feel like look on like the fight night after, like with your coaches? What was the feedback and the feelings on the fight, the first amateur fight?
It was good. It was really, really good. It was a great feeling. I think when it comes to fighting, there's so many highs and lows, and I think that was probably one of the highs. I think because of all the pressure put on by myself, as in the expectation I have of myself to do well, and the fact that I knew going into the fight it was going to be a tough fight against a credible opponent who was very dangerous in a whole new field. So I think getting the win was quite elating, and it was great. Like I think you can see in the post-fight celebration, I was very, very happy. And it was funny because a lot of people who come down to watch my fights, usually they're like, we've never seen you that happy after a fight before. I was like, yeah, I mean, usually I am. But that was a very nice feeling to get the win in that fashion, but also after the build-up and the anticipation for quite a long time. Like, I just want to get into the ring or into the cage and get this first fight under the belt, really.
And I mean, it's on a card that's like really well respected. Cage Warriors Academy, like you said, Jack Mason, the promoter over there. And even the way you was matched up there, like you see these other cards where people kind of not getting matched up in a 50-50 fight, perhaps. And sometimes it's a bit difficult to watch. But, these guys, they put on a good show and, they did a good job with that, matching that up. Because like you said, it was old school UFC striker versus grappler, like what's going to happen. Also, for that fight, he was fighting out a GB top team, right?
He was fighting out a GB top team. So he was fighting out a GB top team. And this was, again, start of March, basically, when we had the fight. So Brad Pickett was in the corner. I don't remember who else was in the corner, but I remember Brad being there in his face. And so at the time, obviously, that's where I train now. He then moved soon after to Costa Blanca, I believe it was actually.
Yeah.
Because he runs his own gym there now, linked to Fight Zone.
I was about to say, yeah, because that's how, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so he's moved over there. It was soon after the fight because I had a conversation with him after and he said that's what his plan was and whatever else. But it was quite random in that I was still at Titan at the time and I got back into training a few weeks after that. Obviously, I had the fight. And Luke Trainer, who's obviously UK fighter, representing fighting on Bellator, he was going to go down and spar at GB Top Team. And he asked if I wanted to come along, just to get a bit of work in. And I was like, all right, it would be nice to get some sparring in with people who are similar size to me as well. So I went down there, saw Brad, and before I actually get onto that, after the fight, I had a quick conversation with Brad. He said, if you're ever in South London, come to the gym. Obviously, this was, and South London is a mission to get to. I don't go to South London, it's a rarity. Passing the river, maybe Greenwich, but going further than that, it's like, what's the point? But anyway, so went along with Luke, got some sparring in, and it went quite well in that I showed a good amount of my skill set, which is nice, where you get the coach's attention. I try not to sort of go into a place and sort of toot my own horn. I just try to let the skills sort of speak for themselves. Yeah. So after the fight, Brad sent me a message. After the sparring session, Brad sent me a message and asked if I could come down and give a bit more work to one of his other fighters as well. And that's just how it started, really. Again, it's a bit of a journey getting down there. Yeah. But I started off initially just going down there and sparring some of his fighters. Obviously, for me, it was learning about the grappling aspect and a bit more of that with people similar size to me. And obviously, I guess the benefit from their end was just trying to get some striking in or some sparring in with someone who can strike as well to my level. And then I realized actually, in order to continue to improve, I need to be surrounded by people who are good. And not to say that wasn't the case in Titan, because it was. But again, good coaches, teammates similar size to make it more realistic going into a fight, experienced people, etc. That's how we sort of went. But I think it was over a number of months, shifting sort of life, work patterns, etc., to be able to accommodate going down there. Yeah, because it's about an hour and 15 hours and a half really to get there, and then same on the way back, and as well as the training. So it takes up a fair bit of the day.
So, because you didn't make that switch for your second fight.
No, so I was still in Titan at the time.
Yeah.
So this was in the summer of 2022. Fortunately, that fight didn't really go to plan. Yeah. And I'm not one to make excuses at all. So we're not going to go into what went wrong essentially. But on the night, when I was in the cage, the better man won. In that I got taken down. I got rear naked choked in the end. And then the fight was over, all under minute and a half or so. Yeah. So it was pretty quick. I didn't get to show my skills, and it was quite disappointing in that regard. Yeah. But it was also a wake-up call in a sense. So it was after that point I was like, actually, if I'm going to do this, I need to take things a bit more seriously. I need to dedicate the time to anything to get better. And in that regard, it was the grappling. Because I did make some, even watching it back, I was like, I shouldn't have done that. In fact, even at the time during the fight, I could see things coming. I was like, okay, you need to sort of, he's level changing now, he's about to shoot, defend, move the hips, etc. So theoretically, I knew what to do. The body wasn't quite responding as I wanted it to. And that just comes down to a number of things, but I think the main thing it came down to is the practice or lack of practice. So it's just constantly drilling. So once after that fight, this was in June, I believe it was, it was like, all right, cool, wake up call, you want to continue doing MMA. Let's find regular training where you're going to get surrounded by people of similar size, good experienced people who are going to be better than you in the grappling aspect, so you can constantly learn and be a sponge. And more time like that usually meant being a nail for a long time, in order to grow. And so that was the case, really.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I remember talking to Chanel Dyer about when she started, she got invited down to Team Underground. Okay. And she was always used to having the upper hand in like striking and whatnot. And then she was just like, and I was just getting beat up. She was like, I was just, in the jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and she was like, but obviously that drove her to want to improve and get to know these other skills, jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you about there, so like Dom was already, so it's Dom Rogers, the second fight.
Yeah.
So again, going back to that, because he was already quite experienced. I think he was like 5-0. This was that was his sixth fight.
Would have been his sixth fight, yeah.
So I imagine that this was the sort of thing that you was coming up against, but it's something I guess you would have to accept with your level of experience on the kickboxing and Muay Thai side of things. So was there like a big gap in like what you was getting offered? Because I imagine someone like you're a competitor, you know, you take these high level fights. You're not going to want to go in there, and which you do see on some of these regional shows, against someone that's highly touted, maybe coming from Muay Thai, kickboxing, or a different sport, and then they get matched up with someone that might be like, you know, 0-20, and it's, well, you know, we're getting this person on the card. It's a big deal to sell some tickets. Yeah. So I can imagine someone like you, just from talk. This is like the second time we've spoke in person. But I can imagine this is something that wouldn't be up your street. You wouldn't be jumping at these sorts of fights.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think given where I want to get to in the sport, it's like, in my mind, it's like, it is what it is. I've been experiencing the striking elements of the sport, which means that is a give and take. I wouldn't want to face someone who's 0-20, 0-10, in that I'm not getting anything out of it. You know, if I go in there and someone of that record, you'd suspect they're not really that good, or they're just falling over, essentially, one or the other. And I'm putting the time, the effort, and the training in the camp, not for someone to just fall over. And it's not going to benefit me at all, aside from potentially make me think that I'm better than what I am. And my thoughts with that fight in particular, because it was hard getting matched. In the end, I was speaking to him, I was like, yes to every name that came along. Irregardless of the record, it's like, irregardless of who they are, I believe in my skill set. I want to be able to beat them, and if I can't beat them, it means I've got some more work to do. So you're right. He was 5-0 at the time, and yeah, good in a sense. And you know, this is his field. This is his sport. And like I said, on the night, I reckon he was a better man. You know, now I think I can beat him. I've always thought that, and I will continue to think that. You know, I think that's just the competitor and fighter in me. You know, but I think that served me better than facing someone else, such as an 0-10, who's going to fall over, and then I continue to bump up or create a record of 2-0, 3-0, 4-0. Because realistically, it doesn't really matter that much, especially at that level in that regard. It's like, I wanted fights, I wanted experience, and that's part of the experience. Because essentially you're going to be learning from it. You know, even like I said, the first fight, it wasn't smooth sailing, and that's why it was beneficial. If I went in there in any fight, if you go in there and you starch the person in 10 seconds, there's a limited amount you can get from the fight. Now, there's going to be plenty you get from the training leading up to it. Now, if you land every single technique you wanted in 10 seconds, then great. But that's never usually the case. You train for a number of weeks and months. It's hard to show all the things you've been working on in that one fight. So yeah, it was a nice reminder, fighting someone like that who's experienced. But actually, this is where you want to progress in the sport. This is what you need to do.